Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm pleased to participate today as I'm resubmitting a question I asked on November 17th during question period. I speak for veterans and their families and their caregivers when I say that the backlog of disability benefit claims at Veterans Affairs Canada is entirely unacceptable, a backlog which now stands at nearly 50,000. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, the backlog has grown from just under 21,000 in March 2017 to 49,000 as of March 2020, and 22,000 of these applications were only waiting for a decision from the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Parliamentary Budget Officer has also highlighted a significant decline in service standards. Only 37% of applications are processed within the 16-week time frame, which fails to meet the 80% standard. And when I talk about only waiting for a decision from the department, Madam Sean Dean is one example. He completed 28 and a half proud years of service and applied for his VAC pension over a year ago now and completed all paperwork in October 2019. He was informed his application is now in this decision phase. Well, that decision phase says that it will take up to 64 more weeks to process, a grand total of over 2 years since his paperwork was completed. In the past two federal elections, this Prime Minister promised that he would expedite veterans' cases. Speaker, I don't think it would be responsible to place blame for the backlog on any of the hardworking frontline public servants. I know that the vast majority pour their hearts out and into making a positive impact on our veterans' lives. On the contrary, I continue to believe that the problem stems from an entrenched status quo that resists change. As a result, veterans are finding it increasingly hard to navigate the process of securing the assistance they need, and it's very demoralizing. I'm not alone in my thinking. Certainly many veterans and veterans service experts back up my claim. Their bravery in coming forward with their stories is commendable in itself. At a disability rate of 93%, veteran Charles Scott was left to navigate the VAC system all on his own. As Veterans Affairs Committee, at committee, Mr. Scott provided a frank assessment, and he says, "The onus has always been placed on the injured and ill to advocate for themselves and to navigate a gauntlet of processes for these applications. The processes are extreme. They subject the veteran and their families to sanctuary trauma by having them prove that they're actually ill and injured when the documentation for the most part is right there in their file." Mr. Scott believes that the current service delivery system is broken and worsens veterans' injuries. 3 benefit regimes, Madam, and ever-changing policies coupled with this backlog prevent veterans from accessing benefits and services. Mr. Scott has told us that in some cases it leads to veterans abandoning their claims altogether. Doreen Weatherby, Consultation President for the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada, believes that the short-term hiring that is being suggested by this government will not solve this problem. It will only postpone the problem. Rather, she has called on proper resources to be in place so cases can be resolved in a timely way. The experience of Mr. Scott and Mr. Dean are only 2 of many personal testimonies that suggest the backlog and process is exacerbating the sanctuary trauma felt by our veterans. They've given all they have for Canada, only to be faced with an entirely new battle with the government in obtaining the help they deserve. So, my question is, will the government do what needs to be done to make these changes happen for our veterans? Thank you, Madam.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Veterans Affairs.
Madam Speaker, to begin, let me say that the number of pending applications has never been 50,000. In fact, the measures that have been taken to address the backlogs as of October, Veteran Affairs has reduced the number of applications outside of its service standards to under 19,000. That said, this government absolutely agrees that the number of veterans waiting on decision for disability benefit application is much too long. Permettez-moi donc d'exposer.
Allow me to briefly set out the measures that the government is taking to reduce the backlog and ensure that the veterans who are waiting for decisions concerning disability benefits receive an answer within a reasonable time. First, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Veterans Affairs made this backlog his priority when he became Minister in 2019.
reduce wait time for veterans. It included overhauling how teams are organized, making better use of technology, and reducing the time it takes to make decisions. This plan includes a $192 million funding commitment to address the backlog. It's money to keep the 168 decision makers hired since Budget 2018 and to hire an additional 350 employees.
These wait times are improving with the creation of teams responsible for veterans' benefits. These teams guide the processing of claims, from the time they're presented until such time as a decision is handed down. The report of the Parliamentary Budget Officer shows that new employees hired as part of this investment will have a considerable impact on veterans receiving answers much more quickly.
It's also worth repeating that since 2016, our government has invested $10.5 billion of new money to support veterans and their families. That's money for additional educational opportunities and career transition services, tax-free benefits for caregivers, and services for family. It's money to increase physical and mental health support and for research of new treatment for PTSD and related mental health conditions.
The government has also recognized the extreme pressure that this pandemic has put on organizations that support veterans. And that's why in November, the minister announced the granting of an emergency support fund for veterans organizations of $20 million.
Groups like the Royal Canadian Legion, the NET Vets, True Patriot Love, and Vets Canada do so much for our veterans. But in these most unprecedented times, they are being challenged like never before. So many veterans look at these organizations for advice and guidance and to give them the kind of support they need. The government understands just how valuable these organizations are to the well-being of the veterans and their families, and is pleased to be able to provide some assistance to help these organizations continue to operate at this difficult and stressful time. Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, veterans are proud and humble. They are people who have put the safety of their fellow citizens first, well before their own well-being. We owe them so much, and that is exactly why the Government of Canada is doing everything in its power to ensure that veterans receive the support and the care that they deserve. Thank you.
Madame la Présidente.
Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The heavy-handed removal of child benefits from Sean Brewery is only one example of similar behavior against other veterans who will speak out about VAC's mishandling of their files. The Veterans Ombudsman investigation is clear. A day after the former minister dragged Mr. Brewery over the coals for his criticism of the department, his son's child care support was revoked. Mr. Brewery has called VAC's decision both vengeful and retaliatory. Given the timing, it's clear that this was a political decision. I do not want the member to say to me that this is an issue that was with the public service. It is not an error or misinterpretation by the hardworking public servants. It's an egregious retribution on this Canadian veteran. But as I've elaborated in my speech, Mr. Brewer's case is just the tip of the iceberg. Why does this government choose to attack veterans who disagree with them? After serving our country abroad, veterans are turning home only to live in fear of being punished for expressing their concerns, loss of service, harassment, and red flagging of their files. Why is this government and Veterans Affairs contributing to veterans' sanctuary trauma?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, Canadian history has been written largely by the members of our armed forces who received the torch from past generations and thus continue to inspire future generations to follow their example.
Ever indebted to all those who have worn the uniform for what they have given and what they have given up in the name of cause and country. The
Government of Canada is so very grateful to the courageous men and women in uniform, those who have come before us, and those who continue to work and do everything in their power to meet the needs of those who serve.